Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I'm here with my good friend, Miss Susan Patton, aka the Princeton Mom. How you doing today, Susan?
Outstanding, boys. Outstanding.
Yeah, you were just way too happy when you
Well,
called
we
me today.
connected. Okay, here's why I'm so happy. I'm so happy that our viewers, I think, are starting to come around a little bit. I think they're coming to understand I'm not a bad guy. I'm not the enemy. I'm a well meaning kind of person. I showed my son some of the comments, and he looked and he said, Ma, they're starting to get you. They're starting to get, and I think they are.
Yeah,
Undeniable. If our viewer, killer of white supremacy and coons, is agreeing with me week after week, come on, we're changing some minds. We're getting across to some people. I love that.
well, when I called you today, you were really ecstatic about it, and really happy white women make me very nervous. So just
Scare you
so
to
you know,
death, right?
absolutely, it's almost traumatic, and that was something you brought up today. You were talking about trauma being inherited, and you actually where you sort of I guess got some education on that in terms of
I
inherited
did.
trauma. Please tell
I
me about
did.
that.
I did. I did get some education on that. There was a study done at Mount Sinai Hospital here in New York, and it took place over a couple years.
Mm,
And it specifically was testing the children of survivors of the Holocaust
mm,
for genetic changes.
mm,
And what they found is that trauma is, in fact, hereditary. Traumas as extreme as the Holocaust or as slavery
mm,
literally changes your DNA,
mm.
which is then passed to your children, to your grandchildren, and it's obviously not known yet how far down the line it goes, but trauma is in fact inherited. I think that's amazing. I think
Mm.
that is so groundbreaking. I think that's such important information.
Mm.
Don't you think? I think that's really
Oh,
important information.
I think it's important. Yeah, it's very important for people to know it. Have you ever heard of post traumatic slave syndrome?
I've heard of post traumatic stress syndrome.
Well,
Educate me.
Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who recently passed, who's very well respected in the black community by people who think the way I think. She talked about that all the time. She would talk about just the way slavery still impacts black people, just on a fundamental DNA level, as well as, socioeconomically,
Right.
etc., politically, and so, when we talk about these atrocities of the past, especially one that was as long as slavery. I mean, we've been slaves in this country longer than we've been free. And a
Right.
lot of people don't think about that. And so, it's kind of tough when people say, well, okay, it happened, it's over,
It's
forget
over.
about it.
It's over.
But there are so many traditions and, just so many after effects of slavery that,
But isn't it amazing that there's science now to substantiate it? There's science to substantiate the fact that the trauma experienced by your ancestors is not just in you because of the stories that they told you or because of the lore that's surrounding it, the tales that are told around, the family tables at holidays, but there's actual science behind the fact that trauma, extreme trauma, changes your genetic makeup and is passed down to your children. I think that's just incredible.
yeah, yeah, I think it's, I mean, it makes for a worthy discussion. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, the big conversation is always, whether or not someone's going to acknowledge, reparations and do it in a meaningful way. It's funny, because I think, look, if you've got this trauma and it's being passed down from generation to generation, then why not talk about repairing the trauma as opposed to just acknowledging it? And maybe acknowledgement is the first step toward actually apologizing for it, which is another step toward actually fixing it. But the thing is, it's funny even when we talk about reparations. I know you and I have discussed this. I
Right.
almost don't want America to address reparations right now. I almost don't. And the reason I don't is because I almost feel that if the government addressed it, they're going to do it in such a meaningless way that it won't have any impact. They're going to say, "Oh, well, we're going to give we're
Yeah.
going to give 1,000 scholarships to black children to make up for reparations," and that'll be it. When really what has to kind of be acknowledged is that there are certain parts of the country that have been just left devastated due to certain policies of the past, and very recent policies like the war on drugs. There was recently actually a story where a Nixon aide admitted that the war on drugs was
That's
designed
right.
to target
That's
black
right.
people,
That's right.
right?
I read it.
Yeah,
Was it
and so
Haldeman or Ehrlichman? Which one of those guys? It was either
yeah,
Haldeman or Ehrlichman.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was 2 days ago. I read it, or
yeah,
yesterday. Hmm.
and so for black people, you're still seeing the effects. I mean, I talked to someone the other day who told me about what it was like growing up with a mother on crack and a father who, what was he said? His father went to prison for selling crack. His mother was on crack. He became a drug dealer because he just thought that was just normal. That was a normal way to make money. And so basically, the thing is, we all make our choices. We know that. But a lot of the choices that we make are based on the environment we're in, what options we feel like we have. When you're a kid, you don't know that you could still become a physicist or go travel around the world and do this and this. You're looking at your neighborhood and seeing what the adults you look up to are doing and what's happening around you. And that's what you base your options on. I remember doing the same thing. The way I would have made decisions as a 14-year-old is very different from the way I would make decisions as a 44-year-old.
Okay,
You
I
know,
disagree with you here, and I think it's a little problematic. I disagree with you that all you understand in terms of your options are what you see in your own neighborhood. I grew up in the Bronx. Nobody went to college. My parents didn't go to college. They live the life of sort of lower income, upstanding, but lower income. My father worked in a grocery store. My mother never worked. I absolutely saw outside of my own neighborhood. I saw outside of the world that I was in and thought, yeah, I aspire to that. I want that. I want a bigger life. I want a more creative life. I want a more engaged life. So I think while it's very important to understand that inherited trauma and where you come from and the life that you grew up in, it certainly informs who you are. It's so important, and we should, remind people, don't let it hold you back. Don't use it as an excuse to not do more and do better. Don't think that just because you're dealing with this very unpleasant stuff that you should use it as an excuse to keep you from living the life you want. Be aware of it, know it, process it, know it in your heart, know it in your head, and then go above it, go beyond it.
well, and I agree with you. I certainly agree with you that choice is important. I had a debate like this with people on my Facebook page when I was talking about wealth building, and I explained that I said, look, every black child can be a millionaire by the age of 40 if you invest in a certain way. I literally did the math and showed them that if in 1972 or when let's say a 40-year-old or 40-plus-year-old was born, if their parents had put say $25 in the stock market every week for them, that child would have several $100,000 today, right? So and I had people push back and say, yeah, well, poverty is real, and poverty, you can't just say something like that. That's irresponsible, and it's not your fault if you're poor, and I agree. I think that, and the thing is, it's not a an either or kind of thing. Policies matter. So the same way you had the vision to see something outside of your neighborhood and the imagination and the energy to pursue that, the question is, what if you hadn't